Hello there, my name's Annette with Sunbeam Fabric Art. Welcome to my channel. Today is layer cake number 25. I can't believe I've done 25 of these layer cake videos. I've loved them all. This one's really super cute, super easy. It's going to be a little baby quilt. It's finishing to 45 by 52 and a half, and it took me about 5 hours to make. Come along with me and I'll show you what I did. I will leave information on this particular layer cake in my description. I don't think it's available anymore. I know some of the fabric is still around, but take a look if you want this exact model and see what you can find. Either way, you would find something similar. Just search on blue, ocean, or beach themed fabric and you'll find something very similar. Here's a closer look at the back of this layer cake. I like to take a look at my fabrics in dark and light, so I just switched my camera to mono, the filter, so it's just black and white. This way I can see how many lights and darks I have, and what you see me doing here is sorting them out according to light and dark, and I'm kind of keeping track. You know, I've got a few that are really, really dark, and then some of the mediums are going to have to double as dark, and some of the mediums are going to have to double as light, just so I can get 21 pairs. Here you see I've got all of the pairs together. I've got my 21 pairs here, and since I've got 42 10-inch squares, my quilt layout is going to be 6 by 7. What I'm doing on the back of each light fabric is drawing some lines. Now I only need to draw 2 lines, and I'll show you that in a bit, but I wanted to at the beginning show you exactly what I'm doing here. First I'm drawing a vertical line at 5 inches, then I'm drawing a horizontal line at 5 inches as well. Those 2 lines were only for cutting. The next 2 lines I'm drawing vertically at 2.5 and 7.5. Those 2 lines are going to be for sewing. I'm going to stitch, once I put the dark and the light right sides together, I'm going to stitch down both sides of that 2.5 inch and that 7.5 inch line, and then I'll be cutting this on the cut lines. And I'll also cut on the lines that I drew for sewing. That is a lot of lines to draw on 21 of these squares. You actually only really need to draw a line at 2.5 inches vertically and 7.5 inches vertically. As long as you can remember you're going to be cutting in half at 5 inches horizontally and vertically both, you're good to go. With all the lines drawn, I am ready to sew. I'm going to be sewing down both sides of the 2.5 and the 7.5 inch lines. And I'm going to do these pairs one pair at a time. I don't like to chain piece big layer cake pieces. It just drags too much for me, so I prefer to just do one at a time. Here is a look at a layer cake where I only drew the 2 vertical lines. I'm going to have to cut at 5 inches horizontally, 5 inches vertically, and then cut on the lines that I drew. Now here is a layer cake pair where I drew all the lines. I just have to cut this apart on all of the lines. Once I got all the pairs stitched, I did take the time to press every pair to set those seams before I cut them. And again, I'm going to cut 5 inches vertically and horizontally, and then cut on the lines that I drew. And for the pairs in which I drew all the lines, it'll be as simple as cutting on all the lines. Each pair of layer cakes makes 8 little units with a dark and a light. 4 of these units will make a block. In my case, I want all the blocks to have matching units, so I'm keeping all the units together for each pair. If you wanted to mix it up, you could do that as well. I also think this quilt plan would look great in 2 colors, such as black and white, red and white, really anything plus white or black would be great. Also, maybe complementary colors that are opposite on the color wheel, like a yellow and a purple, or a red and a green, something like that. With all the units cut apart, it's time to press them open, and I am pressing them all open to the dark side. And you can see I've got my wool pressing mat out. I like to do these assembly line style if I can. Just like half square triangles, once you have this type of unit ready to go, you can turn them all kinds of different ways. You could make all one row horizontal, maybe the next row is all vertical. In my case, I'm trying to make a fence rail type pinwheel. I wanted to point out that the top 2 units of the block are joined together exactly the same as the bottom 2 units of the block. They're just flipped around the opposite way, and that makes the pinwheel. I'm going to be able to stack all my units up into 2 stacks and chain piece the whole stack because they get joined the exact same way. Now I'm at the sewing machine ready to chain piece. I've got my 2 stacks of blocks on the left aligned the way they need to go, and all I have to do is flip the right hand unit over right sides together with the left unit, and that will be my first step. I want you to note that the unit on the right hand side is a little bit shorter than the unit on the left hand side. That is because it's 4.5 inches instead of 5 inches because of the seam allowance. I am making sure to line up my units at the bottom consistently. That way when I flip 2 units upside down to join into the block, there will be a level, even line. Once I had all those units stitched together into pairs, I separated that chain, and then I took one pair, flipped it upside down, and joined it to another pair. I'm nesting that center seam where the 2 units join. I'm making one seam go one way, the other go the opposite way, and they will nest very nicely. Once I finished joining all the blocks together, I did press them nice and flat, and then it was going to be time to trim these blocks. If your pre-cuts were perfect and your stitching was perfect, you should be able to get an 8.5 inch block. I had a couple of blocks that were problematic, so I trimmed all my blocks here to 8 inches square. I'm lining up the seams that join the units on the 4-inch line on my ruler, and then I get a nice centered block. Once I was done trimming all the blocks, I mixed up the left-hand stack so that when I sew these two stacks together in a chain, I won't have any that are exactly the same. When I join two of these blocks, right sides together, I do have one little line that's going to match up. So I'm going to make sure when I run this through the sewing machine that that little seam is nesting. My rows are 6 blocks across, so I'm going to keep joining units into pairs. When I'm all done sewing into pairs, I'm going to break that chain. Then I'm going to sew 2 pairs together into 4, and I have already pre-counted 7 pairs off to the side, and that will be my 3rd pair for each row. With all the rows done, I am using my clips to clip my rows together. I'm clipping on the seam between the units, and then as I go along, I'm also sometimes clipping the halfway mark for each block to make sure that middle line also matches up. Once I had the first set of rows clipped together, I started joining rows. Then I continued clipping rows together, clipping pairs of rows together, joining rows, until all 7 rows were together. Once the entire quilt top was completed, I did take the time to press this quilt top nice and flat. And here is a look at the finished quilt top. It is a beautiful, beautiful beachy blue look. Just the right size for a little kid, but if you needed it to be a little bit larger, you could certainly add a border or even 2 or 3 borders to make it the size you want. If it's a king size, you could just use 2 layer cakes. If you enjoyed this video, I invite you to do all the things, all the subscribing, all the clicking the bell for the notifications, and liking the video. That really helps my channel grow. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you back again real soon.